Welcome to this next installment of SurveyCTO's webinar series. In this installment, the focus will be on SurveyCTO Desktop, which is a new part of the SurveyCTO platform. First, just before getting started, I'll answer the question why SurveyCTO, if anyone watching is not familiar. So SurveyCTO has powerful form design features that lend themselves to flexible and scalable deployments in any data collection setting. The result is robust form designs facilitated partly through features for testing form designs to help you with quality control. Many complex form designs and workflows are possible as required by the project. Quality and trust are design principles in the product, with sophisticated quality control functionality, enabling review and correction of data and automated statistical quality checks. Powerful real-time monitoring and visualization tools are built in while facilitating data publishing to help you take advantage of features of other systems outside the platform. Data protection is also a key principle in the design of SurveyCTO, with multiple layers of security built in, including optional public-private key encryption, single sign-on, and restricted access through the use of custom user roles through permissions within teams. SurveyCTO also offers GDPR-compliant hosting for those who need that. The platform is supported by a team of experts who constantly improve a growing body of help materials aimed at aiding our users with succeeding with SurveyCTO, including a self-paced training course. So this is a quick look at what we will cover in our webinar on SurveyCTO Desktop. We have an overview, a brief discussion of why you would use SurveyCTO Desktop, the setup, adding new desktops in the software, as well as an examination of useful settings. Briefly, SurveyCTO Desktop replaces an older piece of the platform called SurveyCTO Sync. The newer technology in desktop facilitates improved performance and provides most of the same offline tools as before. Desktop will no longer generate stated do files, but those are still available through the SurveyCTO server console. Desktop adds new functionality, including saving logins and settings per project or team, export folder locations per project or team, access to offline product documentation, and links to open the server console and support center right from SurveyCTO Desktop. So why would you want to use SurveyCTO Desktop? SurveyCTO Desktop is an optional component that isn't a strict requirement to use SurveyCTO, but it has many useful functions which can be invaluable depending on your project's workflow. SurveyCTO has many improvements over SurveyCTO Sync, including time-saving conveniences, including saving of credentials for different servers, which can live in dedicated workspaces that we call desktops. Broadly, we conceive of SurveyCTO Desktop as a sort of control center centered around export functionality. SurveyCTO Desktop is the best way to export attached media files like photographs or audio audits, but you can also skip media files to speed up your exports. When you export data using desktop, your exports will be accelerated by local data caching. There are also several advanced options for formatting exported data depending on what your requirements are. Desktop provides a number of offline tools which are also useful when there is no access to the internet. Lastly, desktop is the only way to access certain advanced export-oriented features. And we'll discuss those in later slides. So SurveyCTO Desktop is freely available for Windows, Mac, and Linux users from our new public documentation website called docs.surveycto.com. If you are using Windows, a tip that's useful to know is if you are using 64-bit Windows, there's an option to download a dedicated 64-bit installer package as opposed to the universal installer package, which contains both the 64-bit installation package as well as the 32-bit files. There's also a 32-bit package as well, so you can save yourself a little bit of space if you know which version of Windows you're using. When you first run SurveyCTO Desktop after installing it, it is possible to import settings and optionally local data cached from SurveyCTO Sync. This should get you started seamlessly. However, in this webinar, we're going to look at how to start from scratch, starting desktop without importing settings from Sync. When you select the option to start from scratch, the first two settings you'll configure are the name of your first desktop and your local storage location. Good names for a desktop are similar to good names for a server or a team on a SurveyCTO server. The name is less important if you will only ever use one desktop, but choose something that's descriptive, that relates to your project. For example, the name of a project or organization is common. You can always change the name of the desktop later, so don't worry about that too much. Desktops in the SurveyCTO Desktop application contain specific export settings and configurations, which you'll see later. So another way of using desktops and thinking about naming them is based on the settings that they store. For example, let's say that you sometimes want data in CSV format and at other times in SPSS format. Rather than editing settings each time, which you could do, you could alternatively create a new desktop per settings configuration that you want, even if for the same server. In this example, you might name your desktops CSV and SPSS. The local storage is where you store raw data from the server, which gets processed into the various outputs that SurveyCTO Desktop can generate. The one thing to remember here is not to pick a folder location that's being backed up by Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, or similar, as this will interfere with the correct operation of SurveyCTO Desktop. So with a desktop name and local storage location figured, you'll be faced with an otherwise blank desktop. A desktop will be much more useful with a server connected and some cached data from which you can generate exports. So the first thing you want to do is click on the option to log into a new server, which you can see in the screenshot here. On the login screen, enter the name of your server. The server name is the URL prefix to your server when you are logging into the server console in the browser, and the email address for the user account that has data manager or greater level of access to the server. You can optionally ask SurveyCTO Desktop to save your credentials for the current SurveyCTO Desktop session until you close it. For security reasons, though, you will need to reauthorize when you reopen SurveyCTO Desktop later. With a SurveyCTO server connected, choose a local folder export destination from the export option under step 2. Unlike the local storage location for desktop, this folder could be a folder that's actively being backed up to the cloud via Dropbox or similar. That can actually be very useful. If you're exporting encrypted data, you will also have to specify the private key in the second file selection window. In step 3, for choosing which items to sync, items being forms and server datasets, use the interface to locate the right items. So you can see that there's a search field, and there are also collapsible first level folders, just like on the server, however you happen to organize that. Check the box next to each item you want to export, and then click on the Continue button below. This will be easy if you only have a few forms, but do use the controls you have for searching to locate the forms and server datasets that you want if you have many items in the list that appears. With the source, destination, and items to sync selected and configured up to this point, you can run SurveyCTO Desktop. This is indicated by the ready indicator you see in green. Click on the blue button that says Run Now to get started. Alternatively, click on the Run on Schedule button to get SurveyCTO Desktop to run repeatedly after the specified amount of time has elapsed. So for this to work properly, your computer will need to be logged in and should be set up so that it does not go to sleep. But otherwise, SurveyCTO Desktop could repeatedly export new data, which does have its uses. Depending on various factors, like the number of records, whether it includes media, the export options that you chose, and the shape of the data, running SurveyCTO Desktop might take a shorter or a longer amount of time. It should indicate activity while it is busy and will work faster if it is the application in focus. When Desktop runs and completes its activity successfully, you will see completed in the bottom right. Even if not completed successfully, there'll be a message, something like completed with errors. In the case that it doesn't finish displaying with complete as the result, you might need to do some troubleshooting. So click on the View Details button to learn a little bit more about what happened. View Details reveals the sync details, which is a log of every action performed along the way. The sync details are not intended to be user-facing necessarily, but they do include messages written in English rather than code, so you can take a look if SurveyCTO Desktop reports a result other than complete. The most common type of error will be an internet connectivity-related error, which might mention something like timeouts or something similar. In such case, you'll actually see the English phrase connection timeout in the sync details. Internet connectivity related errors can generally be resolved by running SurveyCTO Desktop again, ideally over a better internet connection if you are working on a poor one, but such errors can even happen on good connections some of the time. You're not alone with troubleshooting issues though. Just click on the Save to Disk button to save this log of activity to a text file, which you can share with us in a support ticket or attach to a user forum post to request assistance. For troubleshooting and beyond, the View Sync History button in the top right of Desktop's interface can also be useful. It contains a list of runs with sources, destinations, and items configured, which can be rerun easily without reconfiguring anything. You'll be able to see whether past runs had completed or not as well. To find out why, just run them again and view the sync details as before. So with that, we've covered most of the basic operations of SurveyCTO Desktop. But But I will discuss a few other useful functions as we explore the menu. So SurveyCTO Desktop can do a lot more for you using its offline tools. SurveyCTO Desktop can be used as a remote server over a local Wi-Fi network, circumventing the server so that you can get access to collected data while collecting that data in a truly offline setting without access to the internet. Encryption key pairs can also be generated for use with encrypted form designs. Forms can also be validated to check whether the designs are free of error, just like what's possible on the server console when you update or upload a form design. And CSV files can also be re-encoded to different encoding formats to help correctly format preload data or export data for other purposes outside SurveyCTO. We're not going to cover these in detail in this webinar, but we'll definitely be able to respond to any questions at the end of the webinar. Now, I'd like to show you a bit more about how SurveyCTO Desktop can save you time. Previously, we connected one server to our first desktop. You can, however, do a lot more than that. One option is adding additional server shortcuts to the same desktop. So let's say you have a second project with a different server. You can click on the plus button to add the plus button below the main menu in the top left, or on the add a shortcut button below your last shortcut to add a connection to that new server on the same desktop. From there, you'd fill out the details as you had done before with the server name and login details. And once configured on that desktop, each time you run it, you'll choose one of the servers to export data from. This data will appear in the export folder already configured for this desktop. As an alternative to creating new shortcuts on the same desktop, you can also create entirely new desktop workspaces. Each desktop has its own local storage location and export folder and custom settings. As before, a desktop takes a name, so enter a name that makes sense for the workspace. Think about giving each desktop a custom icon, as I've done in this case. Also indicates a new storage location, and this should not be a location that's backed up to cloud storage. It should be local storage on your computer. Now we have two desktops. The first one I created earlier, and now the banana project. See the left-hand panel with the two icons, with the plus icon at the bottom. You can easily swap between desktops here by clicking on the icons, or click on the plus button to add a new desktop. As before, you would need to connect a server to the new desktop. We've already looked at that, so that should be fairly straightforward to undertake. So with that side of things discussed, we're going to look at various settings which are available to you in SurveyCTO Desktop. Click on Desktop Settings in the bottom left menu. All of these settings can be uniquely configured per desktop. First, consider the general settings that the screen opens on. You can automatically purge data from local storage that's older than X number of days to control how much data builds up locally inside your SurveyCTO Desktop cache. If you're not familiar with the term to purge, it means to delete. So the data will still be on your server until it is deleted from there by you and can be exported again at any time. You can show test forms. Test forms happen to be forms which are deployed, but they're hidden from enumerators, allowing you to test on a mobile device without enumerators seeing. that form. You can also choose to ignore attachments when working on a poor internet connection or when you want to speed up exports. You will still be able to export attachment data later, but this just might be something convenient when you do need to look at the data as soon as possible. Click on the export options next to General to view additional settings that are available. Under export options, you have various data processing features and options. You can choose whether to include or exclude data based on its review and corrections workflow status. You can also choose the format of your data, selecting between wide and long format data. You can also choose export file formats, including CSV and SPSS file format. A bit further down, you can disable the default behavior to generate binary variables for each responses in select multiple fields. The server console always does this without asking, although like many of these features, power users will sometimes want options other than the defaults. Similarly, to solve for certain issues that you might have with exporting data, you might alter the treatment of groups in the form design option. But the default here is to ignore groups, which is the best for most cases. So unless you know that you're solving a particular problem by selecting another option, go with ignore groups. Then there are also various more circumstantial features for overriding the default separator and CSV files, merging data into Excel workbooks sitting in the export folder, generating geospatial exports called KML files, running Microsoft Word mail merge processes, and also running outside processes like stated do files that could be launched from a then run folder. It's also possible to generate CSV data subsets in case you need to easily share subsets of the data with different audiences. Lastly, for settings, while the server console automatically applies data transformations according to the changes logged in the review and corrections workflow, this behavior is optional in SurveyCTO Desktop, but is still the default behavior. It is best that you read about each of these features in our new public documentation pages, as we don't have time to discuss each of these in a lot of detail. Wrapping up our webinar's pre-prepared content, there are just a few more things to note. Below SurveyCTO settings, there's a help and support menu from where you can launch an offline copy of the product documentation and the support center straight from SurveyCTO Desktop. The product documentation will load whether you have a connection to the internet or not. So you can consult the resources that you need at any point in time, whether you're offline or online. Thank you so much for joining me today for this overview of SurveyCTO Desktop's features.